Okay, we're on the home stretch, so this will be a very short talk, but certainly also important and valuable. It's actually on Catechesi Tradendae, so the transmission of catechesis, and the topic of the talk though is on catechesis and religious education. So I just want to give you a few thoughts. Hopefully there'll be more a confirmation of what you've already gone through and are going through, rather than some new insights. But there's actually 9 sections of it. So it's written by St. John Paul II in October of 1979. And the first thing that I want to mention is that he mentions how the focus of catechesis is always Jesus Christ. It is always Christ. Christ is at the center. It's Christocentric. And Christocentric, it doesn't mean, he says it's in the fullest possible sense of that word. So the center of catechesis is Jesus Christ because it's his teachings that you're teaching. That catechesis, therefore, should be a comprehensive thing. He says that Christ is the center of catechesis, though, not only because we're teaching all of his teachings, not piecemeal. See, it's quite possible for a catechist to teach only some of the teachings of Jesus and not the unpopular teachings of Jesus. Okay? We've seen teachers across the centuries do this, and they haven't been, with all due respect to them, faithful teachers. We've seen in the Protestant Reformation how some very fundamental teachings of the Catholic faith of Christ himself have been put aside. And a catechist must be comprehensive. Now, I know you've only got a half an hour once a week, so it's not exactly as if you have oodles of time, but your intention is upright and you want to give them the essence of the teachings of Jesus Christ. He also says that it's Christocentric, so Christ is the center of your catechesis and your teaching, in another sense, that everything, your own mission to teach as catechists, is coming to you from Christ himself. It is Christ who has invited you to be on this mission and to teach. Right? It's not some member of parliament or the local council or whoever. It's Christ who has sent you. So we therefore also goes on to understanding who the person of Christ is. That he's fully God and fully man, in all that means. And when we have this understanding of Christ ourselves, and we are coming from our personal witness to the resurrection of Christ, and we bring this to the catechesis, then our catechesis, our teaching, is going to be that much more convincing. You might recall how in another passage in passages of St. Paul's letters, I think it's his letter to the Corinthians, thank you, he says, we came to you with no show of oratory. We didn't come with any show of oratory, but we came to you with a power of the whole philosophy. He says we came to you with a show of the power of the Spirit, and with utter conviction. And with utter conviction. I think it's in 1 Corinthians. Now, what does St. Paul mean by that? He meant that, you see, if our message is all about argumentation, about philosophy, and this was very important for the Greeks. I mean, that's where the word, half the English language is Greek originally. So philosophos, lover of wisdom, from the Greek. So they loved wisdom. But if it's all about wisdom, then most people would be able to understand it. But our faith, the faith of Jesus Christ, is something, it is a wisdom, yes, but it is also beyond human wisdom. And that's where we must keep in mind, because that's where the power of the Spirit and where the utter conviction actually helps. And when your children see you convinced that you are believers in what you are teaching, that in itself has its own power. As we say, faith is caught, not taught. And that being said, don't ever expect that all of your teaching or all of the children entrusted to your care, notwithstanding your conviction that they will all receive the gift of the faith. They won't. When I was doing my scripture studies in Rome, I thought to myself, here's Isaac has two sons, Esau and Jacob. They were twins, and Esau was just a few minutes earlier than Jacob, but Jacob has the faith of the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and himself, Jacob. Esau, as far as we know, didn't have that faith. They're raised up in the same family, but one has the faith and one does not. So too, the children entrusted to your care. But the Pope, St. John Paul II, says it's the one teacher, and he is Christ, and it's Christocentric in every way. Now, catechesis has always been done throughout the centuries, and he makes a distinction between catechesis and evangelization. He says evangelization is the thing that has to happen first. Then catechesis is a deepening of that evangelization. In other words, evangelization, euangelion from the Greek, meaning good news or gospel, and it's the initiation into Jesus. It's telling the person about Jesus, about the person of Jesus, who he is, why he's so beautiful, why he's so interesting, a true friend who cares about you, and so forth. A person has, and this is known as the kerygma, that conviction, and it's that proclamation. Now that is the role of evangelization. Catechesis then is what comes after that. It's what deepens the person's knowledge and of Jesus Christ. And the Pope says that this deepening of the knowledge of the person of Christ continues not just in primary school, but in high school and early adulthood, and really throughout one's own life. Now I know what some of you are probably thinking. You know what? We call our work as catechists, but really what we're doing is evangelizing. And that is exactly true. He actually notes this. This is in 1979, and after the Synod of Bishops, he was so insightful, and very few things have changed. In fact, it's come more and more to pass. But he says, so many children, because of their family background, the culture in which they are raised, a lot of the secularism, a lot of bad example from home, potentially, because not every family, in fact most of the families that you'd be teaching, would not be supported in their faith. From what you're giving them in the classroom, they wouldn't be supported in that faith at home. I mean, let's face it, and this is a terrible indictment really on our Catholic education system, but so many of the kids in our schools are not being supported in their faith by their parents at home. And this is a tremendous pastoral challenge, which I hope that the bishops and all the priests will eventually face down the track. But it really hasn't been faced. A lot of lip service has been given to it, but it's a real tragedy. And a lot of staff are not Catholic, or if they are Catholic, are not practicing Catholic. And it is it's a serious, serious problem. But catechesis must, so there's often a lot more evangelization that has to go on before we can actually start with the work of catechesis. The Pope also makes the point, St. John Paul II, that catechesis is not meant to become a discourse of a theological or overly technical nature. You're not meant to answer, even if the children entrusted to your care are in fact evangelized already in believing. You are not meant to try and turn them into little doctors of the law, right? That's not what the purpose is of your role. The purpose, though, is to feed them, to give them encouragement, to nourish their nascent faith. The last few weeks I've been helping with my school principal doing interviews for kindergartens, for the parents. And it was interesting that while most of the parents certainly don't have a living and active faith, in terms of the practicing that you would hope would go on, but there's a tremendous openness there and real goodwill. And I thought, wow, this is wonderful and encouraging, because wherever there's goodwill, you can do things, you can feed it. And when I'd ask them, I'd say, well, in a primary school, we've got half an hour of religious education a day, Kinder 1 and 2, and then in high school, in year 3, 4, 5, and 6, it goes to 3/4 of an hour a day of religious instruction. What structure, what mechanism do you have in place, or are thinking of putting in place, to actually support this? So, because we want to support you as a family, but we want to have be on the same page, and then of course with the Mass on Sunday or Saturday night, and most of the time they don't have anything in place. They'd say something like, oh, well, actually a bit of everything you've just said, Father. so that's fine. So things like creating a culture at home, whether grace before meals, morning prayers, night prayers, reading some stories from a children's Bible. There are so many good children's Bibles around. Perhaps not so many Bibles, but there are really good children's Bibles that are still children, adapted to their age, not so technical like the normal Bible that as adults we should all be reading, but they're there, and so there's a lot of goodwill there. So what I sense is a lot of the parents are still being evangelized, and that's essentially what so many of you are doing with the children, you're evangelizing them before you can actually catechize them. But that being said, is a great place, because you know where you are and you know what you've got to work with. And also bear in mind that your role is to help them in their role as primary educators of their children. They have made promises, unfortunately for one reason or another, they're often not fulfilling, to raise their children in the Catholic faith, and that's not a condemnation or a judgment of any sort, but it is a statement of fact. And so you're working with children who are in that environment. The parents have the goodwill to send the children to Catholic scripture, and you want to feed the children as much as they're able to take, and then, that being said, to know also when to stop, to know when you've given them enough so that they can come back another day and ask questions and their hunger continue to grow. The reason I say this is that sometimes children entrusted to our care will ask questions that are actually very deep. They're too deep for their young minds to be able to appreciate and understand. So when a year 3 child asks me a question about right and wrong, I will answer that in one way. But when that same child asks me the question again in year 7, I know there's been an extra 4 years or so of maturation. They've seen a lot more good, and they've also seen more evil. So they're able to understand my answer. So answer their questions according to their ability to appreciate. And ask them again, and I often do this. I said, I'm going to answer your question now. It's a big question, but in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, and I'll give them a number according to their age, ask a priest or ask someone else who knows the same question, and they will answer your question again. I know we are over time, so I'm just going to race through. So the integrity of content, I've already covered that, is very important. There's pedagogical skills. Pedagogical skills, there's many different ways, there's many different tools to use. The technology can be very handy. Some will use music, some will use maybe a little video program, a story, whatever it is. All these things engage a young child's mind and may be helpful for education. Sometimes, just if you have the knack to be a good storyteller, just tell the story. Because children these days are so used to being pumped with television programs, usually produced much better than any level we can, because they've had much more budget. but that is still a medium. This is direct. And not you on the camera, but this is direct because there's a bond here. I can see you, you can see me. There's a relationship of sorts that is established there, and you have that with them during your classroom time. Okay, I think we're. I'm just obviously racing through through this letter, but.
Can you repeat the name of the encyclical?
Catechesi Tradendae. It's CATECHESI, and then a separate word TRAND. TRADENDAE. Tradendae. And in English, it's the transmission of catechesis. Is the other thing too the Pope mentions is about memorization. Sometimes memorization in the past has been misused because kids were told, learn the creed, learn the 10 Commandments, learn the 7 Sacraments, but they were never told why. Now, over 40, 50 years, there's been the pendulum in the other direction. They've always been told the whys and the experience and all of this, but never been told the reasons why we believe certain things. So they get confronted with somebody or other who questions about their Catholic faith and their beliefs, and they're stunned mullets because they don't know anything about the Bible or tradition or whatever. So get the children to memorize things, but always tell them why we are doing. We need both. And the Pope rightly says that anyone's experience, no matter how rich it is, can never satisfy the full hunger of or rather satisfy the full breadth of knowledge that a person needs to really have a good knowledge about the person of Jesus Christ. And so memorization can be a great aid because learning is tremendous and memorizing, but as you grow in the understanding of what that memory means, then the impact of it will be much, much more. And one of the things I often insist with sacramental programs is you must know the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be. You must know the prayers, an act of contrition. You must know, just very other simple prayers. And I try to stretch them as much as I can, because by knowing these prayers, then they just roll off your tongue, and you also have something to fall back on as your understanding deepens and so forth. So I think I'll leave it at that, and thank you very much for your attention. God bless you, and may you continue well in your ministry. Goodbye.